Start. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our presentation tonight. Our webinar is on roles, responsibilities, and realities. And I'm so delighted to have our guest speakers tonight. Very briefly, for those who are new to us, this is brought to you by AT&J Education Fund, a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit charity. At the bottom here is our website, atnjef.org. And at any time you can go there to check out who I am, who our board of trustees are. But the main thing is the mission of our organization is to educate, engage, and empower. And so that's what we're here to do. We have two massive projects this year. The first one is our civics handbook, which we created with a team of 23 people. Took us a whole year to get it done. But last week and this week, it's being mailed directly to registered 17-year-olds in the state. They will turn 18 and vote in their first election this November. We are so happy to provide this for them. And because of our limited budget, we were able to mail it to the bottom 291 most vulnerable zip codes in New Jersey. And you may ask, what does that mean, most vulnerable? It is a ranking that factored in 20 metrics, including income level, race, ethnicity, and educational attainment. So that's our first big, major, massive undertaking this year. The other one is Board of Education. And we found there was a need. How do we recruit, train, and support Board of Education candidates? And our solution with this is shown on this website, njboe.info. Again, anytime you want to see our resources, please hop on there. But what we provide is educational webinars such as tonight with njboe.info. When we have candidates that are accepted into our training, we do have a rigorous training schedule. We do offer a private candidate support community, and our vetted candidates will be provided with voter lists, vendor lists, and volunteers. And lastly, for the voters, we really want to help voters find out who to vote for their Board of Education. So any candidates that go through our training will be on our website, boardofelducation.vote. I just want to bring to your attention, we do have a training webinar once a month. And next month, I'm so delighted to tell you that we have an ELEC official that's going to deliver a tailored program just for Board of Education candidates. And that is the nuts and bolts, petitions, financial, and ELEC coming up on March 29th, 2023. Please sign up for alerts, and that's how you will know, and you'll get notified in order to sign up. For vetted candidates, if you scroll down on the bottom of that page, you will see that our vetted candidates get more in-depth training, such as you see here. And the last thing is, what does that mean for voters? Will they get the voters' attention? Well, the number one question that we have received is, who do I vote for my Board of Education? There's really not a lot of information about their candidates, what they stand for, their platforms. So through this website, boardofelducation.vote, we will provide headshots, bio, the candidates' platforms, and if the candidates have it, direct links to their website. This allows you, the public, and any interested organizations who are looking for aligned candidates to learn more about. That will be the method there. Our values are very important and it's really the underpinning for all that we do here. There's two things that's going to come through tonight through the webinar. The first one is we're going to talk a lot about resources and how the Board of Education can work with resources to provide for the students, especially for budgets and finances. And then caring and kindness. That is actually going to be the number one thing that's going to come through. You'll hear a lot about, as a Board of Education member, how they work in collaboration with each other and maybe even with the community. So before I introduce our guests, I want to thank our donors. Nothing happens without our donors, and it's them who really sustain us. So thank you so much to our donors. And if you find this program to be of value, I'm asking you to become a $10 a month monthly sustainer for our nonprofit charity. So what is our goal for tonight? And I know I'm going through pretty fast, and I apologize. This is New Jersey fast talking, right? The reason is I want to make sure that our guest speakers have plenty of time with you. Our first goal is to share experiences of members of school boards about the realities of serving. That's what they're here to do. The second one is to educate the public on what to expect from the Board of Education. There is one resource that we're using to really, as a jumping off point for tonight, the previous webinar we have, which is found on our website, we really talked about the legal and political matters. Well, tonight we're going to cover page 2 and 3 of this wonderful resource from NJSBA, the New Jersey School Board Association, and our panelists are going to give their experiences. That said, I want to make sure that we understand perfectly that this webinar does not replicate or supplant training to be provided by NJSBA. It aims to bring forth real people with real experiences. We are using existing resources offered publicly by the NJSBA as starting points of our conversations, but our panelists are speaking on their experiences and are not speaking on behalf of any organization or any school boards. And lastly, I want to make sure that everyone understands that this webinar and our work with school boards is nonpartisan. So with that, I am so thrilled to invite our 3 panelists. I'm so grateful for the time that they've spent preparing this for you and having a frank conversation with you all. So I'd like to welcome Cookie Franco-Herman from Somerset County, Laura Zhang Choi from Warren County, and Allison Kogan from Morris County. So with that, Cookie, can you give us an introduction about who you are?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. My name is Cookie Franco-Herman. I am a mom of 2. One is already a freshman in college, and the other is a freshman in high school. So both of them have gone through or is currently in the public school systems. I also work full-time in investment operations, and as an equity lead in my organization, I work collaboratively with leadership across the different units and currently with our human resources department to review policies in recruitment, hiring, and talent development. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Cookie. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Zhang Choi, and I am currently serving my 2nd term as a Board of Ed member at Greenwich Township School District in Warren County. I have 3 children, one of whom is still in our district. I personally do a lot of intersectional equity work, and I provide academic support for students recovering from mental health crises. I'm also a seminary student and a candidate for ordination in the Presbyterian Church.
Wonderful. Thank you so much and welcome. And lastly, but certainly not least, is Allison, my fellow resident in Morris County. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. I have 5 young adult children, 2 with special needs and 2 who are still in school. I was recently elected to my 4th term on the board, so I'm starting my 10th year as a Board of Education member. I did lose 2 elections and get passed over for an appointment, so it has definitely been a long road before even my first successful election. I am a CPA in public practice, so basically I just do tax and accounting advisory work, and I am glad to be here and glad to see people interested in getting involved with the board.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm so glad that Allison said that she's won many times, but she's also lost. So that is really good to hear, because you're not going to win every election that you run for, right? So I love to hear that. So tonight's program, we're just going to start with the basics so that you all can hear whether you're thinking of running or you're helping others from running, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So with that, Cookie, if I'm going to think about running for the Board of Education, what is the Board of Education? I mean, what does that look like?
Okay, so I'm going to go through each of those bullet points. And starting off, I'm going to mention that school boards can be structured in a couple of ways. In some districts, the board meets as a committee of the whole, meaning all 9 board members deliberates together for all issues and considers all actions. However, the majority of local school boards in the state use a committee system to accomplish their work. In my experience in my district, we have standing committees to do our work. And these 4 committees that I'm going to mention are standard. It could be named differently in different districts. So for us, it's operations, finances, and facilities, assessment, curriculum, and instruction, human resources, policy and communication, and the latest one that we added is the equity committee. And the committee reports back to the full board. I'll explain that later on. So we also have ad hoc committees where we are able to include community members to be part of the committee. Again, in my district, what we have right now is an ad hoc committee for food services and special education. There could also be a negotiations committee, and we have 3 in our district. One is the Association of Principals and Supervisors. That's the committee that we negotiate with, the APSMT. The other one is Communication Workers of America, where mostly these are the bus drivers and bus aides. And then the other committee would be in negotiations with the Montgomery Township Education Association. We also have liaisons to the school boards. So we have also liaisons to the different organizations outside of the districts. It could be with the School Boards Association, either the county or the state. There could also be a liaison for all the different Parent Teachers Association across the different schools. And there could also be a liaison for the township if you would like to participate or listen in to township committee meetings. So there's a lot of collaboration that's necessary in order for things to move around, and it's going to be in committees or as liaisons. So in our district, so how do you get appointed to these committees? In our district, in my experience, the board president engages in conversation with individual board members to ask their preference for committees. So they get assigned based on conversations they have. Who chairs the committees? Again, based on their conversations. If there's a board member who would really like to serve and chair a committee, that can also be assigned by the board president. Each committee also has an assigned administrator to work with the chair. In my case, I chair the Human Resources Committee, but I'm in 3 committees though. I'm in Human Resources, which I chair. I'm also in Policy and Communications, and I'm also in Operations, Finances, and Facilities. So I work collaboratively with the administrator in setting the agenda for each meeting. So the committee discusses each agenda item. And if there are action items, the members of that committee make recommendations in order to move it forward for a full board vote. Or if there is an issue that needs further due diligence work, that gets sent back to the administrator and whoever is the stakeholder to review that issue for discussion at the next meeting. So when do votes happen? Votes happen at the public board meeting, and each member has 1 vote. So you vote as a group at the public board meeting. That's how decisions are made.
So a cookie, if
Yes.
I could just wrap up what you said here, and I think what you brought out was really important. And those are examples of all the committees. So when you're joining, and I cannot believe that a 9-person committee can get all of this work done. I mean, that's amazing, right? It's but it sounds like, so you, if I remember your background, you have an HR background and you choose to serve on the HR committee. So
That's correct.
Right.
I've had experience in my professional capacity to work in human resources, particularly in developing pathways for for talent development internally, and also trying to look at diversifying our hiring program. So that's why I had, wanted to be in human resources for a school district.
Wonderful. And I'm just going to skip really quick because I know that Allison's a CPA. Allison, do you serve on the finance committee in your school board?
I am on the chair of my finance committee. Yes. And I also am a member of the negotiations committees for our
Wonderful.
district, so that I can be the consistent person, making sure that all the negotiations, are related back to the finances.
Wonderful. So it seems like it's really beneficial to have school board members with various backgrounds serving on the Board of Education. So it kind of rounds out and everyone can bring their experiences to the board. Thank you so much for that. So Allison, I totally forgot that you're going to go in depth about this too. But, Cookie talked about what the board looks like. Can you tell us about, in general, what the role of the Board of Education is?
Sure. Officially, the role of the Board of Education is to see that the district is well run. It is not to run the district. That is the administration's job, which sounds like semantics, but it's really important that the board members realize that they are not running the district. In reality, what we end up doing most of all are the three things that are bulleted on this slide. So I will go through the first two on this slide bullets, and then Laura will do community relations. So policies are the real meat of the Board of Education. There are policies and regulations for just about everything. The majority of policies are mandated by the state, and Board of Educations can tweak them a little to make them more personal to their district, but they have to follow the policy, the mandated laws of the federal and state government. And every policy for every school district is public information, and it's posted on the school district website. So you can go up and see any policy in your district. There is a schedule for updating all the policies so that no policy sits, on the books and doesn't ever get looked at. In order to change or create a policy, there are steps that have to be followed. The normal process or best practice is that it goes to the administration first and they look at it. Usually it's the administration that is, having to change a policy. So the first step is, after it goes through the administration, then it goes to the policy committee, or whichever committee is, designated to go through the policies. And basically they're looking to make sure that it doesn't conflict with any other policy. Throughout the process, the policy will go to the public several different times before it gets on any agenda meeting. It will be, publicized that the board's going to talk about this policy, and then they bring it up in public and the public's allowed to talk about it. And then best practice is that if the policy does pass and gets a passing majority, then it comes back to a second meeting for a second reading. So there's many different times that the public will get to see any policy that's going through. And nothing moves quickly in policy or in anything because it has to go through so many layers, which is a good thing because it has to go through many layers and there's a lot of chances for the public to get involved, but it also means that nothing happens quickly. And the other thing about when you bring policies up to the board, most boards use Robert's rules. And so there's specific regulations or best practices on how you bring things up and how you take things off of the agenda and how you put things on the agenda. So there's rules and policies for just about everything.
And if I just may add here, for those of you who are not familiar with Robert's rules, Allison, if you're a school board member, you do get training for Robert's rules, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's mandatory training that goes through a little bit of it, and then there's optional training where they specifically dive into Robert's rules.
Right. Thank you. Go ahead. Tell us about budgets and finances.
So budgets and finance is more of an oversight for the Board of Education. There is somebody in every district who is hired in their accounting department that creates the budget, creates the priorities, costs out contracts, does all of the reports. The Board of Education is kind of the oversight to make sure that where the money is being spent is where the public expects the money to be spent, and that it follows all the, all the mandated rules for special education and for equity and all the rules. There's things you have to put your money for. And a few of us have mentioned negotiations. Obviously, when you do negotiations and you go through, you are making a contractual obligation. So that all goes into the budget, and you don't get to change any of that during budget time. You've already agreed to all of that money. So what most people don't realize is the majority of a school budget is contractual and is not changeable in the budget process. Like 85%, 88% can be contractual and cannot be touched in the budget process. The other thing is that the budget still has to be approved by the county superintendent. So even if you decide to put a lot of money in one specific area, if the county superintendent thinks that other things are going to not be funded appropriately, they will send it back to you and tell you to do the budget all over again anyways. So.
Hey, Allison. So I hate numbers. I hate accounting. I'm really intimidated by, taxes, and that's why we have a bookkeeper and accountant, because I can't handle any of that. So if I'm joining on as a Board of Education member, if I don't want to be in the finance committee, I'm not obligated, right? So
no, as Cookie said, usually the board president will ask what committees you want to be on. They try to put people who have a strength in those areas in the committees so that they can add the most to it. And New Jersey School Board Association also has little brochures and stuff about what to ask. So if you don't know what to ask in a specific area, New Jersey School Boards has a little document that'll say, if it's budget time, these are the questions you should be asking. So they give you a lot of hints about that kind of stuff.
Great, thank you.
And I also want to add that you still vote on those budgets. Even if you're not engaged, you should still have enough conversation and gain enough knowledge so you know which way you're voting, because the public is still accountable to your vote. So yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
And I'm going to also add that the school district's business administrator is your friend. That's the individual that goes through the budget, goes through the operations, goes through the finance. I am lucky that we have a business administrator who is willing to sit down with when I was new, sat down with me because I had questions, because there are fund accounts. There's just a lot of things, because I wanted to understand so that when I'm looking at the budget at that time when we need to vote as a board, I know what I'm looking at. So the business administrator is a good resource.
Wonderful. And I'm so glad you said that, because at the top of this program, I had told everyone in the room and also those listening on recording that there were two things you were going to hear: collaboration and resources. And thank you. So you guys have both said and brought out how much resources are available to you. You're not going to fail in your job as a Board of Education member. And so for those out there thinking about or might be intimidated, don't be intimidated. You're going to have resources available to you. You will be able to collaborate with others. And I know that Laura's going to talk about community relations. So Allison, can you tell us about this last bullet point, the employee?
Sure. The Board of Education members only hire one employee, and that's the superintendent, sometimes known as the CSA or the Chief School Administrator. And that's the only employee that the Board of Education hires. And again, the county superintendent still has to approve that contract. So finding and making sure that you have a good CSA is really important, because there really needs to be a good working relationship between the superintendent and the board. The superintendent is the one in charge of implementing all the policies that were created and meeting the expectations of the public. as the Board of Ed has described to the superintendent, what the district really expects. All of the other employees of the district are hired by that CSA and they are recommended to the board. The board can ask for, additional information about the employees, but the board has to recognize that the CSA is charged with running the district and they are the educational expert and the one to supervise and evaluate all those employees.
Thank you. And so I know that our audience is vastly varied in their experience. So for those of you who are from a corporate background, if you think of it as the superintendent is the CEO, right? Am I right on that? And the Board of Education is really your board with the chair, and the CEO is the one running the organization. So with that, I want to bring in Laura, who's going to talk about this third bullet point, community relations. So Laura, can you tell us about your work as a Board of Education member as it relates to working with the community?
Yes, of course. So as a board, as a whole, most boards have 9 members. I know of at least one board that only has 5 members, but we have to remember that collectively we vote as one body. So individually, we may disagree and debate and deliberate behind closed doors during committees and executive sessions. But as Cookie and Allison mentioned, there's a lot of work done and conversations had, negotiations and compromises made before a policy or agenda item comes up for a vote. So when it comes time to actually vote, we present to the public as one body that's usually united in one voice. Sometimes your personal opinion may be misconstrued as if you're speaking for the board. So it's important that you make sure to disclaim that you're speaking for yourself and not for the board if it can be misused in any way. So I really appreciate Wynn's disclaimer at the beginning of the session here. Your opinion does not represent the board. You should not share your opinions as if you're speaking for the entire board or the school district. So there are strict ethics guidelines that board members must adhere to as well. And as a member in the community, I'm sure you'll run into folks in the grocery store or wherever in town, and they want your ear on certain topics and stuff, but it's just important to share information that's already public. And so nothing that you've discussed in private or in committee or executive, we're barred to even discuss with our families. So yeah, and that's usually, you're a part of the board, the entire board. Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
That's really good to know. Have you been approached in a grocery store as a board member, Laura?
Yes, in different places. Sometimes, folks want to know what we know. So, yeah, so it's just important to remember what you've discussed in private, behind in committee, and what's already been shared, during public meetings. So yeah, you just have to be discerning of that.
Thank you.
If I may add, I'd like, folks to also, I offer my time to parents who would like to have a conversation with me. And when we do sit down for a conversation, I say, I can't discuss anything, I can't make a decision, but I can hear you out. At the very basic level,
Right.
the parents just want to be heard. So
Absolutely.
all these folks coming to board meetings, they just want, and I'm going to talk about that later, but they just want you to hear them out. And that's what I say, I'm willing to listen to you, but I can't make any decisions because it has to be a board decision. But you can certainly meet with parents if you want to. Just give that disclaimer.
And that's actually a really good segue into the next part, which Cookie's going to cover. So when in talking to our panelists and preparing for this webinar and trying to figure out what it is that we want to enlighten and make aware for the general audience, one thing that came up in Cookie's district was just so inspiring to me and good to hear that I would love for her to talk more about it. So Cookie, can you tell us, because I know recently with all these contentious board meetings we see in the paper, can you give us an understanding what the public Board of Education meeting is and is not?
Yes, certainly. So the Open Public Meetings Act, or the Sunshine Law, is designed to ensure that decision-making government bodies in the state conduct their businesses in public. Because of this law, the community is allowed to observe the board meetings. The state law also requires a public comment period. So there's no required format for public comment. The board is allowed to establish our own reasonable restrictions on the time, the place, and the manner of public comment. For instance, where I am in our district, we allow the public to give comments twice in 2 specific sections of the meeting. One for any new business item a community member wants to bring up, and 2, right before voting happens, allowing the public to provide their comments on action items that are on the agenda. And each commenter is allowed 3 minutes to speak. But please remember, public comment is an opportunity to listen to citizens' concerns, but not to debate issues or enter into a question and answer session or a cross-examination between the public and the individual members on the board. Be also aware that all issues brought before a board meeting will not be resolved that evening. Boards can respond to the public commenter by seeking additional information, and we can delegate that to the superintendent, and then the superintendent will delegate the research, if you will, to the proper administrator within the district. So, you know, if you can't have those Q&As or a debate in public board meetings, when can you have them? So last year, what we did in our district, we conducted town halls. We conducted 3 town halls. One was exactly for this, the role of a board member, because we were encountering community members who were expecting us to respond to them during the public comment period, which, as I mentioned earlier, we're not allowed to do. So we conducted a town hall for what is our responsibility as board members to the community. And that's where we had been able to engage with community members. We also did a town hall on the health and PE standards, which was a hot topic last year. And because we were having a ballot initiative in last November's, we had a ballot initiative in November's election, establishing a full day kindergarten. We also had a town hall for that. So we had 3 last year, which we had community members come and there was actual conversation. And that's the best way to get feedback in real time from folks. And again, you know, you listen to them, you do the back and forth, but there's no promise that whatever input that they're sharing with you is actually something that we can implement right away, because we're looking at a full school district, right, of 5,000-10,000 students. It's not just one pocket of students, but it's the whole district. So we, you know, it's a good opportunity to listen.
Hey, Cookie, on the town halls that you had, and I just love that there is an actual example of this. And I know this is atypical of other school districts. I've not heard of many, if at all, have done these town halls. So kudos to your board for doing this to the community. But just really quickly, did you find that the benefit of having a town hall kind of diffused some of the tension? Because it really clarified the roles, if you will.
Some of it, but not all. Again, the health and PE standards was such a hot topic. I think they, you know, some individuals just wanted what they wanted and was not open to hearing what we have to say, that these standards need to be followed by the school district. Because there are penalties if a school district does not abide by the standards being implemented by the state. We can get dinged for not following, we'll get points deducted, and we'll have corrective action. There's a lot of layers, again, to that. It's not simply we won't do it, because the school district will have serious consequences for not following the state law.
Thank you so much. So Laura, we had started this program where I brought one resource that we are using as a jumping off point. You being a Board of Education member, can you tell us about your experience with NJSBA and what they provide?
Yes, of course. So NJSBA is a wonderful resource available to all board members in school districts. Most, I want to say most, I can't say all, because there is actually no requirement for school districts to be members of the New Jersey School Board Association, but most are, and they pay into membership fee, and they provide, and in return, and NJSBA provide continuing education opportunities, the ethics training. Each school district has a field representative that oversee your district, that they're the ones that conduct the trainings. You can request things like Robert's, we want a Robert's rule training, can you schedule us in? And they will come and do the training for you, with you. They also annually, they conduct the superintendent evaluations, and there's just so many resources that they do provide at district, county, and state levels. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of their resources. They have their own council that answer any legislative or policy concerns or ethical concerns. They update you on the latest policies and provide resources on how to be the most effective school board or school board member. And I know on their website, they also have new candidate resources, new candidate packets. Yeah, I mean, I think at the county and state level, there's an annual conference. It's a great place to network and connect with other school districts to see how your district is doing compared to other school districts, and what is normal for you may not be normal for them. You share ideas and just to learn how to be more effective. So if you engage, I think you won't find yourself siloed or working on your own. And some school districts do, right? Like they kind of just do their own thing, but there's a really great coalition. Wynn built a great coalition here through these resources, but there's a great coalition of members at NJSBA too. So yeah, use their resources.
Yeah, sorry, Laura, if I could also add that they also, New Jersey School Boards provides additional committees that you can join. Not only will you meet people from across the state and learn about their best practices and what they're doing, but you can also bring, more information back. For example, I'm a member of the New Jersey School Board Legislative Committee. So we have meetings and they tell us what new laws are going to come through and, what's going to be passed. And they take our input and bring it back to the legislators so that they have a better understanding of how the laws that they are considering may impact school districts. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn, get information outside of your specific district.
And I will also add that the NJSBA facilitates the mandated training that board members are required to participate in. So on your first year, you have governance, second year is finance, third year is student achievement. And if you're lucky to be elected for your next term, your fourth year is on legislation. So those are required mandated trainings by the state, and you can go through the NJSBA to do it.
Thank you. So it seems like there's a lot of collaboration going on, lots of layers of collaboration. So as you are joining or thinking of running for the Board of Education, it requires that mindset of working together for the good of the community. And you're collaborating internally in a structure with established policies and processes. You're collaborating with the community. You're collaborating with fellow board members across the state under NJSBA. So I love that spirit of working together in community. So I want to thank our panelists so much. We have 15 minutes left, 16 minutes left. So I will make sure we have time for Q&A. So let me just start off the Q&A session by asking our panelists this first question. And I know this is dependent on what committees you serve and what you sign up for, which is, again, your choice. But let me start with Laura. Laura, what do you spend the most time doing as a Board of Education member?
Probably reading on, policies and doing deep dives into budgets, even though I'm not a budget person. I love numbers, but the school budget finance is so complicated. But I also want to know, want to make sure that I know how I'm voting. And so making sure there's no misappropriation of funds, things like that. And so, but your superintendent and the BA, business administrator, is also always your best resource to answer those questions as well. So what we spend the most time doing, I think it's also seasonal. As Allison was saying earlier, how your superintendent is your most, that's the only person you hire. When we just went through, hiring a new superintendent, and that took so much time, but NJSBA, our field rep, also made sure that we were unanimous in our choice, because we don't want division and, from day one. So, that is your most important job, because you're not hiring anybody else. So that was very time consuming, but other things like negotiations is very time consuming for people on that committee. But everything else is just, at least 2 meetings, 3 meetings per week, depending on how many committees you sit on, and so,
Right.
So yeah,
so
just a meeting.
It could be as much as you want, or as little. Great.
Yes.
So Cookie, one more question before we get to our audience here. What has surprised you the most about serving on the Board of Education?
So obviously I'm a parent, and I was watching from the outside before I joined. And I thought, if I joined, I could just do this. And then I joined and all breaks. I can't just come in and do whatever I want or tell folks whatever I want. There's a chain of command. There's one thing. I can't just, as Allison said, our employees, the superintendent. And part of the chain of command is, if I have an idea, an issue, or whatever it may be, I can't just go to the BA. I can't just go to the supervisor for curriculum. I have to go through the superintendent and share my thoughts with him or her, and they will convey that to whoever is the appropriate person. I do have a direct line with the human resources assistant superintendent, because I sit on the human resources committee. But other than that, that's not something that we are allowed to do. Right. And I think coming from the private sector in my organization, where I'm used to having a process, and a very specific process where I know soup to nuts what I need to do in order to get a decision made. It's not the same in the school district. Yeah. You might be frustrated in the beginning because you're thinking, I want this, we got to move fast, move fast. Doesn't happen that way. As Allison was explaining earlier about policies, there's, a proposal, research, a first reading, a second reading. By the time a policy is officially approved and operational, it could be 3 months from the time that it started, or even more. It depends. So it's not it's a slow moving train. Be patient and work and network. I think it really helps. And I've shared this with when we were talking in the beginning, it really helps that you build relationships with the people in the board office and with the superintendent. Trust is a very important thing to have between the superintendent and the board. Otherwise, you will not get things working in the way that you'd like.
So Cookie, thank you so much for that, because I think that's one of the things that we are going to hear are frustrations of newly elected Board of Education members who come in with certain expectations and not realizing that there are people in place, there are processes, and there are systems, and certainly under the Board of Education, there are policies that have to be followed. So right now I have questions, Q&A in the chat. So I want to call on Leanne Grendel to ask the question to Allison. Leanne, if you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. One of my questions is related to whether, especially for somebody who's interested in getting involved and trying to decide if this would be the right, the right fit. I'm just wondering, what do you feel like, if any, are any like legal ramifications or liabilities involved with being a board member, especially for somebody who's new who'd have to kind of jump in and start placing some votes and making decisions and being a part of committees and part of the process, but learning as they're doing that. I guess my thought process is, what if I vote the wrong way and somewhere down the line, am I liable or, legally accountable?
Liable.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leanne. Go ahead,
Thank
Allison. You take that one.
Sure. Part of what Laura was saying is there's always training. So there is new board training that where they go through what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you should not do. And a lot of it is virtual now and probably, on demand. So you may not have to wait till the next time they're offering it type of thing. But there's usually a board attorney that will help you make sure you know what you can and cannot do. A lot of it when you're first on the board is listening and learning from other people and finding a more experienced board member and saying, what are the main concerns around this vote? And just having somebody explain to you, what the main topics are. You can make your own choice on how you want to vote, but you want to learn what other people think are important about it so you can make your own decision. And then once you make your vote, that's your vote. You vote however you want to vote. We are all under an insurance policy of, board kind of like E&O insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So I have never heard of anybody being held liable for anything they did at the board table. If you try to do something on your own, like Laura was saying, you don't want to ever represent that you're speaking for the board or trying to make a decision for the board. That might potentially get you in some ethics trouble. But the only concern, as you're voting is you going back later and saying, oh, if I had known this and this, maybe I would have voted a different way. So basically you want to make sure you get as much information as you can before you vote. And you can always recuse. You can always say, I'm not comfortable voting on this. I'm going to recuse myself. And that is perfectly fine.
I also want to add in here, the board as a body can vote on and implement, whatever action items. But if I remember correctly, Cookie, in our conversation, that you guys have to be compliant with policies handed down, and that there is was it once every 4 years that they do to make sure you're in compliance, and if you're not, you can be written up, and there could be a written a corrective and action plan?
Yes, it's called QSAC. Allison, do you know, it's qualities, I had to Google it. Quality
okay.
Single Accountability Continuum, the
Yep.
NJQSAC. It's something that the Department of Ed runs. And yes, it's every 3-4 years where a district will be audited, if you will, by the county superintendent, the county business administrator, a member of the Department of Education, going through all your policies, everything, and make sure you are following the law. And yes, you can get dinged. That's what I was referring to earlier. If they see that you're not compliant, you'll get minus points and you'll be given a corrective action plan
But
until you're.
when you say you, it's not personal you, you're
No,
talking.
it's not personal you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it's the district, not us.
Yes.
Like individual votes, don't worry about that because it's your vote, but it's like it's the majority still that would pass an action item, right? So even if you voted no, that's your prerogative, but the majority, would vote for whatever action item would go through.
Got it. So I wanted to reassure everyone who is tuning in and watching this that you do have support in the things that you will vote on. You have the ability to research and read and consult. So you are not left to just figure it out on your own, right? And that there's no personal liability for what you're doing as well. All right, before we leave, and we have 5 minutes left, and I apologize that we went a little bit long, but I really wanted to have our panelists speak on this. But I do want to leave with one question that I want to ask of our panelists. Hold on one second. All right, my question is, why would you recommend people to run for the Board of Education? I mean, what was your reason for running? The whole point of our webinar series is to break it down in very simple terms, in very accurate and real terms, what it means to serve on the Board of Education. So to each of our panelists, you have 1 minute. If you would think about and tell me, why would you recommend people to run for the Board of Education? It's a volunteer job that can take hours. And what was your reason? So I'll start with Laura.
So I ran in 2018, and I'm passionate about educational equity. That is just my passion. It's what I love to do. A community organizer. I find myself in these spaces, and I care about what is happening, in how decisions are made and who's invited to the table, and who gets to make these decisions. And I knew that New Jersey has some of the most inclusive and progressive educational policies, but there really isn't a accountability arm as strong as the policies themselves. So when I first start to become engaged and just show up at board meetings and ask questions, not in a hostile manner or anything, I just want to know what you're doing, about this policy, and how are you implementing this policy? And I just wanted to learn, and then after about a year or so, I put my name in the hat. So I just wanted to make sure that we are following and implementing the policies that we adopt.
Wonderful. So it seems like policies really drove you to want to serve on your Board of Education. Allison, why would you recommend people to run for the Board of Education?
I would recommend it because education really matters. It makes a huge impact in a lot of lives, obviously in students' lives, but it matters a lot to your town. It matters a lot to the people in your community. And this is a very hands-on way to get involved and really make a difference. So.
Thank you. And Cookie, what about you? Would you recommend people to run for the Board of Education?
I didn't plan on running in 2020. And then 2020 was such an interesting year in my eyes. And I I saw the students of my district step up and advocate for issues that were important to them. And I thought to myself, you know, academics were already like stellar there, but I also want to make sure that our students become good community citizens. And I saw that with my high school students who were out there using their voice to express their thoughts. I wanted to make sure that our school still has the environment for these kinds of ideas, exchanges to thrive within our school district so that our kids feel safe and go out into the world and become productive community members. That's why I wanted to be on the board.
Thank you so much. So we are up at 8 o'clock. I want to thank our amazing panelists for sharing their experiences with you all, for laying the what really is what's happening in their communities and their boards. And I hope that when you're viewing this and thinking about it, that you do consider serving your community as a Board of Education member. I know it's a volunteer job, and I know it's probably, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric going on. We have to acknowledge that. But as you can see here, these three wonderful women who stepped up to serve their community, and some for many years, like Allison, and some newer ones. Each of them brought their own personal experience and their own professional experience to bring to their board to, again, to better serve their community. So I applaud you all. I want to thank you so much for your time and dedication in helping to educate and to enlighten the public at large. And lastly, I want to thank our audience in the room and those watching on recording. Please check us out on njboe.info. The next webinar is up on March 29th. Sign up for alerts so that you get into these wonderful meetings. And I love having you all here tonight, and I so appreciate your questions. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email me at win@atnj.org, and any of our panelists can get back to you. Again, that's win, W-I-N-N, @atnj.org if we did not get to your questions. So thank you so much. I want to bid you all a good night. Thank you. Night, everybody.
Thank you.